I have lived on the South Shore of Boston for over 5 decades. I went from being a literal child to being a college student needing cheap housing to buying fixer-upper homes as my family grew, belonging to many clubs and many places, all the way to purchasing my summer home on Nantucket. I've lived all along the South Shore in towns like Milton, Quincy, Hingham, and Cohasset, which are all in a line all along the shore. During my time on the South Shore, I have been everything from a full-time stay-at-home mom, PTA president, I've been an entrepreneur, and now a real estate agent, all while living in different towns on the South Shore. So in this video, I'll be talking through what my life has been like living on the South Shore of Boston. I'll start right at the very beginning and I'll go all the way through present day. I hope you enjoy. Hey, I'm Katie Norton. I'm a realtor in Massachusetts, and this channel is all about helping you know what it's like to live on the South Shore. If you're interested in that, please subscribe to my channel. And if you're thinking about moving to the South Shore, give me a call. I would love to help. Let's jump straight into it and start off with Stoughton, where I was born and raised. So Stoughton is where my parents met, it's where my grandparents lived, it's where I was raised, and where I have fond memories of growing up there. In fact, just later today, I'm going to meet a couple of my girlfriends from high school for a quick lunch so we can catch up and talk about all things Stoughton. If you don't know where Stoughton is, it's off of Route 24 on your way down to Rhode Island, on your way to the Cape. It's sort of southeast of Boston. So that's where it all began. If you're looking at the map, you can see that Stoughton is not quite on the shore, but it is southeast of Boston, and I was very familiar with visiting places on the South Shore as we were growing up and doing different things. When it was time for me to decide where I was going to go to college, the obvious choice was Boston. I just loved visiting Boston as a child, and it was so close, but yet so far away. So I moved to Quincy, I had an apartment there, and I commuted into the city to go to Suffolk University. One of the reasons I ended up moving to Quincy was actually affordability. Living in downtown Boston back in the 90s was really difficult for someone who was just starting out in college. So I basically moved to Quincy, I got a restaurant job, and during the day I would commute into the city and I would go to my classes. Honestly, so easy. I would do different things. I would try to mix it up a little bit. My regular commute would either be to jump on 93, sit in a little bit of traffic with everybody else, and I had a go-to parking garage that I loved for all 4 years that I was there. When I didn't feel like taking my car into the city, maybe I knew the traffic was a little bit worse on certain days or the weather was a little bit crummy, I would jump on the T and the Red Line specifically. So I think if you watched my video about Quincy, I talk a lot about the Red Line. There's actually 4 different stops through Quincy that would get you into Boston. When I tell you it was about a 20-minute T ride, I didn't even have time to finish my coffee. That was one way to get into the city. And then once I was in, I would just walk up to school, do all my classes, spend the afternoon in Boston, and then head home for the evening. The Suffolk that I went to is located right by the State House. And since then, the school has expanded greatly. And there's Tremont Street and Beacon Street and Cambridge Street. It's a much larger campus. So if you're thinking about traveling into the city for a job or any commute on that side of the city, Quincy's a great option. So after college, I stayed in Quincy. I had an apartment. I had a ton of friends. We would go back into the city to go out for fun. I also worked in the city. I worked at Children's Hospital for a little while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. Ultimately, I ended up going to Miller Brewing Company and working in their marketing department. They had offices on State Street in Boston, so it made it super easy to keep commuting in. And that's actually where I met my husband. My husband, Jim, he grew up in Braintree. He went to BC High. He also had an apartment in Quincy. Right as we met, he was just purchasing his first house in Quincy. When we got together, I took over all the decorating and all the do-it-yourself projects because we had $0 at that point and we needed to make it work. So that was 1997. So when Jim and I bought that first house, it was an absolute dump, but it had the bones and it had everything that a real estate agent will tell you. It was in the great location and it was the absolute worst house on the street. When we tell you this, it is the truth, because then you can take that house, add value a little bit at a time. We didn't need to change the whole house all at once. We did it little by little and we did improvements that we would like, but we thought that down the road would add value when we were ready to sell. We knew this was not our forever home, it was just our starter. And I think if sometimes as a first-time home buyer, you can see the vision of what your first home will look like, because you can't get to your second, third, or fourth home unless you buy your first one. While we were in that first house, we had our first son in 2002, and Jim was in grad school going over to Boston College to finish up his master's degree. Then we had our second son, and we realized we had outgrown the place. So we had started looking, and at the time, it was a really tough market. You think today's market is tough? Back then, it was just as tough. And so we started looking where we loved, the South Shore, and we came across our second house in Hingham. That was also a fixer-upper. In fact, funny enough, even though I thought this would be my dream house, when we first moved in that very first night, I cried because I couldn't believe we had given up the house that we had done all that beautiful work on to move down to this house. But in the end, it was the right decision because we spent the next few years fixing that house up and then turning around and selling it. But while we were doing all that, we were truly living our dream life in Hingham. We joined the Newcomers Club right when we got there, and we met a bunch of friends who to this day we still see around town and we still go and grab drinks with once in a while. I would bring the kids to the South Shore YMCA. We joined the Weymouth Club. I can't even begin to say all the things that we were able to do while we lived in Hingham, while I was raising the little boys, who are now the big boys. The boys both went to preschool in Hingham, and of course I was on all the parent committees that I could join because I really loved being a part of their day-to-day life in Hingham. While we were there, Jim's career took him to New York City. And so rather than us move to New York City or to a suburb of New York City, Jim and I decided that it would be best if we raised our boys the same way that we were raised, in the suburbs of Boston, and being able to attend the same school that he attended, Boston College High School. So that's what we did. Jim would leave on Mondays and come back on Fridays, have our life all set up to go for the weekends. And that included soccer, hockey, baseball, lacrosse, whatever else the boys were doing, and then a ton of social stuff that we had found, because it really is important to balance the adult social life with all the kids' activities. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, so even though I was considered a stay-at-home mom while Jim's career took him off, I still like doing things that were outside of the kids. So I like doing stuff that involved other people's kids, because I started doing a cooking class for kids. I had been in the catering world for a long time, and I had met tons of chefs. At one point, I just was brainstorming with another chef, and we came up with this cute idea to do cooking classes for kids' birthday parties. I actually rented a space in Hingham Square and started a business with 3 other women, and we called it the Co-op. It became called the Coop because no one was calling it the Co-op at that time. But the 4 of us had our own individual businesses. That way we could split the rent and we could share the responsibilities because we were all moms in town. We wanted to be entrepreneurs, but we knew we needed a village. We couldn't do it by ourselves. I would teach these cooking classes at the Coop while my kids were in preschool and then eventually elementary school. I loved it so much. I met so many wonderful families, and we would just make dinners. These kids would come in, we would make dinner for the evening, and then they would bring it home and they would show their parents what they did, and the parents had a dinner that they could cook. So it was tons of fun. It was really more of a hobby than a financial success. So I kept that going for a few years until I got pregnant with Charlie, my 3rd son. Again, here we go. I am having a baby. I'm running a business. It's time for us to move into another house because I need a new project. So that's when we decided we needed to expand, and we moved the family to Cohasset, which is literally right next door to Hingham. So I felt like I could keep all my connections in Hingham, but have that brand new house in Cohasset, which is what happened. We went from our second house, which was another fixer-upper, which we were so proud of, but it was time for us to buy a house that we could just love and live in for a while. That brought us to Cohasset. So you're probably wondering why we didn't just stay in Hingham and buy a bigger house or a brand new house. But at the time, again, the market was very funny. Our house had appreciated so much in value, but so did all the other houses. And so when we loved our neighborhood and we lived on the south side of Hingham, which is closer to the highway, we just looked and there just wasn't anything that was fitting the bill. We had talked to a builder and he had just finished this beautiful house on Jerusalem Road in Cohasset. We went and saw it and it just felt right. And it was tough to leave our neighborhood and our community, but we felt like this was the natural progression for our family. Jim and I really like to take on new projects and meet new people and do different things. We never leave anyone behind. We always stay in touch with everyone. everybody. And like I said, to this day, my kids still talk to those kids that were in the neighborhood in Hingham. I still have friends in the neighborhood. The babysitter that used to babysit for us in the neighborhood, who was an older woman who didn't drive, and I used to drive for her whatever she needed errands run, we still keep in touch with her. It was more just about trying a new adventure. And let me tell you, I loved Cohasset because it was so different than Hingham. It's a much smaller town. The kids went to one elementary school and then one middle school and then one high school. So these kids could meet each other at 3 years old and know each other until they were seniors in high school. And so that was just a nice vibe, different vibe that we were looking for. While we lived in Cohasset, of course, I did what I always did, which was immerse myself in the community. I joined the Cohasset Education Foundation. I loved that because it was more than just a PTA. It really was raising funds for the additional needs of all the different schools. The teachers would apply for grants. So I had that grant exposure, I had fundraising exposure, and I understood really how a school is run and what the business of a school is. So that was an interesting time for me. I loved being a part of that. We also joined the Cohasset Golf Club, which again, still have friends there. Wonderful place to bring our kids. There was always Christmas parties and Halloween parties. You could do your personal social events there and all the different things. Great to have a place to go and be sporty, but also be social. One of the biggest things that's different from Cohasset to Hingham is Cohasset is truly a beach town. Everyone loves to go to the beach, and so a lot of nights were spent Friday and Saturday night at the beach, and that's very, very social time. For my family, it was a little unusual because we had a house on the Cape. Jim's parents had owned a home on the Cape since 1965. Jim had grown up there as a child, and he had spent his summers as a teenager working at different restaurants in the Mashpee and Falmouth area. He really wanted the kids to have that same exposure, so we spent most of our weekends down on the Cape with Jim's parents, which was a great, great thing to do. But we did miss out on a lot of that social aspect of Cohasset on the weekends. So we would basically pack up and leave when everyone else was settling in and relaxing. That was just a little bit of a different vibe. But I did love my during the week time with all the other moms and the dads. We would do a lot of social activities during the week. But during this time that we were in Cohasset, Jim and I fell in love with Nantucket on a 1-week family vacation. We had gone there. We had forgotten, but that was actually our first ever vacation together in the summer of 1997. He and I had gone over to Nantucket for the weekend, and we had the most fun we had ever had. And then because we were like getting married and we lived on the Cape and we had all these other things going on, we just never made it back until the summer of 2011 when we had an opportunity to take the kids there for a vacation. We just fell in love, and we realized that we could actually potentially replicate what his teenage and childhood was like on the Cape, but do it on Nantucket. So the next couple of years we rented houses on Nantucket until we were in a situation to buy our beautiful home in Brant Point on Nantucket. And I'll talk more about Nantucket another time, but that's an important part of my story of why we left Cohasset a few years after we bought our house on Nantucket. As our family grew and expanded, and as the kids grew up, we were doing so many sports and activities, and we were just all over the place. There was no downtime in our life at this point. Jim was still traveling to New York City every week. I was still with the kids all week. And then in the summer, we would head over to Nantucket. So it was pretty hectic. Since we knew all 3 kids were going to be attending BC High, and just to give you a little bit of background, my whole family, all my brothers and sisters, all of Jim's brothers, everyone lives in the Boston area, but not quite in Boston. So I have a sister who lives in New Hampshire. I have a brother who lives in Rhode Island. Our parents live in Norton, Stoughton, Canton. Jim's brother lives in Milton. His other brother lived in Hingham. So we were sort of all over the place with family. One of our favorite places was always Milton. When we lived in Quincy, we always wanted to live and be a part of the Milton community. When it was time for us to move closer to Boston and closer to ultimately the train for New York City, we decided on Milton was our place to go. So it wasn't about needing to leave Cohasset so much as it was about wanting to live in Milton at this point in our lives as our kids were older. All 3 kids at BC High and all the activities, Jim being in New York City, it was just a lot. We found our dream home in Milton. We've been so happy. And of course, just like everything else, I joined all the parent associations at BC High. I've been a member of one of the parent associations now for 7 years, and I still have 5 to go. So I think I'm going to be one of the longest standing members, consecutive members of this parent group at BC High. And everyone gets a big laugh out of it when we talk about it. We got so lucky because both of our older boys decided to stay local for college. Our oldest goes to Trinity College down in Hartford, Connecticut, and our middle son goes to Boston College. Because we live so close in Milton, we can jump on the Mass Pike and head out and get down to Hartford, Connecticut in about an hour and a half. And obviously we're close to Boston College, so we can get over there in about 25 minutes. It's not that they need us to be available. It's just nice that they know that we can come on over if they need a visit or they just need some mom time or some dad time. One of us is always available. We love to go to all the sporting events. Our son plays on the football team at Trinity, so we get down to those games about 3 or 4 times a year. Our other son is just involved in a bunch of different things at Boston College. He works at the Paradise Rock Club, which is a really cool venue to go watch bands. So sometimes we'll go visit him at work and get to see a cool band. So yeah, Milton's a very convenient town for when you have adult children to go hang out in Boston and see them. So as you may or may not have noticed, I haven't even talked about my real estate career on the South Shore yet because it hadn't even started. Believe it or not, I only just got my real estate license in 2022. Honestly, part of the reason was I was advising people all the time on what parts of the South Shore they should move to, why I liked certain neighborhoods, why I thought certain places were convenient, and I was constantly helping family and friends of family and friends when they were moving to Boston or doing it. I just felt like it was such a natural progression of my life. I've always, as I said, loved to be an entrepreneur and always doing new things, trying different careers, I guess you could say. As you may or may not have noticed, I haven't even touched on my real estate career yet because it hadn't even started at this point in my life. When we moved to Milton, I was still focused on the kids and my family life, and I wanted to get them all settled into their new home and their new life. A few years in, I decided it was my turn, and I've always advised family and friends on places to live, different neighborhoods, different towns, different reasons for different stages of life about where they should be living or moving to. And I just felt like with all of my understanding of the market over the past, since 1997 to 2022, so 25 years of actually living in the real estate market, buying and selling, renovating, fixing up, renting versus owning, I've done it all. And I just felt like if I got my real estate license, then I could actually truly help people. I started focusing on first-time home buyers when I first got my license because I just thought it's such an important, pivotal time in someone's life. Buying that first house is scary, it's emotional, it's exciting, but it's so important to just do it. And I felt like if I could give people the experience that I had had and the positive experience that I've had, I could really help people in their journey, in their real estate journey. So if you're thinking about moving to the South Shore, please reach out because I would love to help. I hope this video was insightful for you. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video where I talk about part 2 of my life of living on the South Shore. And in that video, I'll talk more about like a snapshot of my everyday living on the South Shore in present time. As you can see, I cannot get enough of talking about living on the South Shore, so please don't hesitate to call. Even if you're not quite ready to buy that house, I can still educate you. I can help you. There's so many things I can do for you before we even get to that point of actually purchasing the home. So give me a follow, give me a call.